Welcome to the day 2 of, what are we calling this one now? Shads. And we're going to start off with Ben Gahagan from Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up bright and early. If you read the abstract, I'm here to give you good news. I'm not going to talk about quantitative methods. I'm going to leave that part out. I'm going to try and sell you on cutting shad up instead. So that's just a warning in advance. If you really here for the stats, they're not going to happen. I am here to talk about some work that my co-author Mike Bailey and I did over a few years in the Charles River, but we do think it has application into small and large river systems, and we'd like to see more people do this, and hopefully I can do a good job of outlining why and convincing you to do the same crazy things that we do. So, dams and diagnose fish. I think that if you work with diagnose fish or around diagnose fish, you know that this is an issue. Karin Lindberg and John Waldman did a really nice job of synthesizing a bunch of data from both sides of the Atlantic showing that diagnose fish as a suite are doing very poorly. And we've had these persistent declines in the last century, and then when you have data to go even further back than that, they look even worse. We covered some of this yesterday, talking about Hudson River shad. And dams, as they pointed out in their paper, is one of the primary causes. So when you're talking about diagnose fish, you're looking at dams. This is a figure showing from the Nature Conservancy Northeast Aquatic Connectivity work, showing the number of dams, and here it's just a heat map. If it's a red dam, that means it could really benefit nadirous populations by removing it, and then as you go to green, it's perhaps less important. But I just want to show the scale of dams that we have in the Northeast. Tying that together, great work by Carolyn Hall in showing in 6 main watersheds just how momentous from 1600 to 1900 that drop in productivity. So these dark bars are what we used to have for alewife productivity in these systems in Maine, and now we're looking at that in current day, really less in current day. That was in 1900. So pairing that up with some of these new novel ways of doing things, I'm a newer career scientist, so for me that's kind of what I came into, but I think when you start looking back at the literature, it really is, for some of the people in this room, it's really amazing what we can do now with the new technology. To illustrate that, here's a little something similar to what Dave Secor was showing yesterday. These are striped bass that I tagged in Massachusetts, about 250 of them. The data is aggregated to week, so the size of the dot is the number of striped bass that were detected at a receiver in a given week. And what you can see is this swoop jumps. We're now in May. Fish are running up the rivers. June, back in Massachusetts. So you can see that textbook migration of striped bass, but these are real fish. This is data. And so it's really cool that we now have the ability to do something like this. Unless we're talking about river herring and shad. As anybody who works with river herring and shad knows that you're here to make your life hard. Nothing goes easy. So when you get into telemetry and river herring and shad, and I'm focusing on shad here, I'm going to keep saying river herring and shad because we're doing this with river herring because we're really dumb. It's typically within the year, 1 year only for these type of records. And that means that you have to deal with trying to understand what's for real and what's a tagging and handling effect. It also means that you're getting primarily in-river movements only out of these fish. You're not getting those marine movements like I showed with the striped bass figure. And part of that is because, you can't see my beautiful titles, it's okay, they're always dumb, is that you see a radio tag here. By and large, people have been like, we're not gonna handle shad and river herring very much, they die very easily. We're going to use radio tags because we really want to know how they're moving around dams and in rivers, and radio works great. You get a precise location within the river. All this is true. They're doing gastric insertions. These fish are either regurgitating the tag or typically dying afterwards. So we get this really limited look where you have a tagging and handling effect with alosines. Now, as I said, technology advances. Here's a typical 23 millimeter pit tag. This is a V9 Vemco tag. It has a 480-day tag life. And it's the same length as this pit tag, it's just wider. So Mike and I said, wait a second, what if we did this instead? What if we tried cutting open some fish and doing surgeries on shad? And it's gonna increase the tag retention, you get marine detections because you're using an acoustic technology instead of a radio so the signal doesn't attenuate in salt water. If I'm trying to keep everybody on board here, so if I'm going too fast, let me know. So we fired off a quick grammatically incorrect email to somebody who's tagged a lot of shad and knows a lot about shad. And he said, hey, are we crazy to think about doing this? We got a one-word response. So we did it anyways. So call us crazy. We went ahead and went for it. And we were really happy with the results. We did some in-hatchery testing before we took it into the field, and we saw within a few weeks that this fish, you can barely see the mark. Here you can see a slight scarring. But we did well for American shad in a hatchery setting. These two green bars are our survival curves, so days out from surgery on the x-axis, proportion surviving on the y. 2015, really well. 2016, not quite as well, but in both cases, these are averages over years of fish that were just on station for broodstock. So they had no tagging, no handling for that, and we had higher survival than the broodstock did. So we said, okay, we're confident that we can at least try this in the field. So going into the field, I really just had this here. I'm not going to talk a lot about our methodology and what we were doing and how hard we were trying, but I want to highlight that here's the Charles River running from west to east, very urban river. This is a highly urbanized river. We've been trying for over a decade to restore American shad. They were extinct by the 1920s in this river, and we've been trying very hard to restore them, but we're having a lot of success. The fish, before they even get in the river, have to navigate that fresh salt to freshwater interface through a lock system. So they have to navigate locks, find their way in through the locks. We have a locking protocol to get them into the river. And then they have about 15 kilometers uninterrupted until they hit the Watertown Dam, which is a low-head dam. It does have a 4-foot denial on it. Unfortunately, the geniuses sited it on the opposite side from the thaw leg. So river herring, they do pretty well, past several 100,000 fish a year, but shad have a hard time because they have to navigate their way across this shallow ripple to move from the side of the thaw leg to where the entrance of the fishway is. So right now we're working on dam removal here. It's a great site for it. Hopefully it happens. But it's an unfortunate thing where a fish ladder would be helping, but it's helping for some species, but not for shad. So 2015 and 2016, here's the layout of our array. Don't need to focus on it too much. It did change from year to year, as these things often do as you learn things. For what I'm going to talk about today, we're just talking about an area around the Watertown Dam, then an upper river segment where there's some spawning habitat as well, open river, the area around the locks, and then Boston Harbor. I'm going to stick to this color scheme throughout my talk. So as we move from the top of the river, see red, orange, yellow, green. Really quickly, I'm going to give you a look at tag attrition. So as we move down the river, it's 2016 tags, we're losing fish. Same thing in 2015. We did have immediate mortality, so within 5 days, a higher rate in 2015 than we did in 2016. And we made some adjustments between those 2 years that really helped. I found somebody who was crazier than Mike and I. They were tagging Pacific sea herring, which are even smaller and more fragile. And so I called that person up and said, how are you doing this? Can you walk me through everything? And so I made some adjustments to our tagging, and we seemed to have much better results with the way the fish responded to it. So 2016 was a better year as far as our results for survival and then also for behavior. So I'm going to unpack some telemetry data here for people who are not used to looking at it. What you have across the x-axis in far too small font is date, so we're running from mid-May through August on the x-axis, and then each of these rows is one fish. So what you're seeing is the daily history of a fish through time. And again, I have a color scheme. So where you see the warmer colors, they're up by the dam, and as you move through oranges, yellows, and greens, they're moving downriver. So using telemetry, we can talk about the entire time the fish spent in the river, and we can also talk about specific periods of time and locations where fish were found in the river, like the dam and the locks, which really dominate this color scheme. So you can quickly see, when you look at this stuff, if you're used to it, what fish are doing. Right now, I'm going to start small, try and blow everything up. So let's talk about what they were doing at the dam. When you just isolate those detections near the dam, it became really apparent when we started looking at an hourly resolution that there was a dial pattern to their movements. Sure enough, turn that into a polar plot, do the appropriate tests, and you find that fish were there. And this is a receiver that was right on spawning habitat, basically from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. is when they were there. So they were probably using this. These fish can't get over the dam. We're using this as their primary spawning area. They're there at night, shad spawn at night. And so we think this is what was happening here. It's also possible that they were just seeking refuge when they couldn't pass the dam, because typically shad don't love fishways at night. Then talking about the whole package, between 2015 and 2016, and I think there's tagging and handling effects here too. I said 2016 we did a better job, and I think that led to less fish exhibiting a fallback behavior, which is typical with alosines. We have fairly similar residence times. I don't know how picky people are about alpha marginally. I don't like saying marginally significant, but I guess we'll go with marginally significant. But we got fish back. So now we had fish the following year that we could look at that had no tag and handling effects, longer residence time. I'm also kind of cheating, which I'm denoting by color scheme. Blue are these fish that we tagged on the spawning ground, so they'd already entered the river by the time they became available to us, and we tagged them. Part of why this might be higher is because now we have detections of fish from the moment they got near the river and their entire time. So I'm gonna go ahead and let's not worry about what they were doing necessarily, and just look at these blues. So this is a receiver outside of the locks. So we can look both at the earliest arriving fish, which is we typically, from 6, 7 years of fishing, electric fishing the river, weren't even going out on the river till late May because we couldn't get fish. But we had fish that were showing up as early as late April to enter the river, and we had fish arriving as late as June 22nd. The same fish then became our earliest departing and latest departing fish. So we have this period of fish being in the river, even though it's a small river, from April through late July in this year. And we can also truly look at their full residence times, which is pretty narrow range, which we thought was interesting. We can also then reverse that and see that for the first time we had fish go over the dam. We had a telemetry fish go over the dam, which was really interesting. 6 of our fish went over the dam, but 1 fish unfortunately did not make it back down, so we're going to take them right out of what I'm going to talk about. And we got these fish here, and we can see how much time they spent above the dam. I don't know if this is a tagging and handling effect or a water year effect. 2015 and 2016 were both dry years. 2017 was a very, very wet spring. So it may have just been it's possible that there's just so much water in that spring, they were able to get over to the fishway. We have video of these fish using the fishway. We've gotten in 2 years about 40 fish each year. So it is possible, but this was interesting to see. I'm gonna go even further out from the whole river and to talking about marine things now. So if you work, notice the quotations, if you work with alosines, we kind of wave our hands in the air, we make noises, and we call it an assessment. That's what we do. I've done it, I'm guilty. But what we're really lacking is what we always call the black box stuff. We don't really know anything about what these fish are doing in the marine environment because it's really hard to apply these technologies that we're applying to all these other fish like sturgeon and striped bass and see where they go. We can't do that, or we have not been able to do that typically with shad and river herring. Roger Rolifson and Michael Bailey did a very intensive tagging effort in the late 70s and early 80s. And I mean, this is why you like acoustic telemetry, is they tagged 13,000 plus fish for 827 returns. So at least, I think our average is a little higher than theirs with the telemetry fish. We got like 10 out of 50 back, so 20% over 6. So John Waldman and colleagues did a limited in scope and time look genetically at what some mixed stock fisheries could look like. So that tells us a little bit about where fish are moving. And then you get your rough scale Northeast Fisheries Science Center survey, which isn't designed for these fish, but it does pick them up. So I'm just going to skip straight to the map. Again, color coding, green being the harbor. I've classified these in orange as near coastal Massachusetts. Then in both years we had clusters of receivers out on northern Jeffreys Ledge. And finally we have receivers in the Canadian Maritimes, both in the Bay of Fundy and off of Halifax. And now I've sized these to the number of detections, number of fish detected at each one of the receivers. And what you can see is this very clear pattern where we're getting good perceptions of fish as they come out of the harbor, and then fewer fish in this coastal Massachusetts array of receivers, some on the Gulf of Maine, some in the Maritimes, and we have 1 lonely fish detected in the Mid-Atlantic Bight. You can look at some of the individual patterns, and this is, I mean, if you do striped bass or sturgeon, you've seen a million of these, but for shad, nobody's done this before. Nobody's been able to do this before. So it's kind of crazy, this 2018, 2019, we're sitting here, we're talking about this, but that's what it is. So this is really fascinating. This is a fish that we didn't have any detections. I don't want to infer, as we go into these, I'm not inferring these are direct line movements, because there's long absences in some of these cases, but this is where we detected it last, and then a few months later it was detected off of Halifax. We have a lot of detections of this fish off of Halifax all winter long. And then rapidly in mid-April, it makes in less than a month, it's back to the Charles River to spawn again. Likewise for this fish, these were both males. We had 6 fish detected in the Maritimes. 5 of the 6 were males. I don't know if it means anything because it's such a small sample size, but it's intriguing, and it's one of the reasons I want to keep doing work like this. We had a female that was detected in the mid-Atlantic, which was really interesting. Almost all of our detections, they would come out, kind of what this fish did. Well, this is actually the return trip, but we have fish come out, and then we pick them up on the northern side over this array of Boston Harbor, and then off of Gloucester on a NOAA receiver. Then we get some of those fish up here. So it seemed like a lot of the fish were doing that Rolfson and Dadswell classic, northern to the Bay of Fundy, and then back down. But this fish we never got going north until it did a very wide U. This is big, but we detected down here, and a couple weeks later it was off of Cape Ann. So it did a big loop to get around and come back to Boston Harbor, which is interesting. So I also want to take a second to say, while we didn't get a lot of marine detections, that tells us something in and of itself. Because when you think about where receivers are, we know where receivers are. We talk with other researchers, we communicate, we get our striped bass detected everywhere. People like Dwayne get their sturgeon detected everywhere. We know where there are receivers. So the fact that we didn't get detections from those areas also tells us that that's not what they're using. Predominantly, all these receivers are in these near coastal areas, and we're just not seeing shad in the near coastal area. We're seeing them. They must be using deeper, further offshore waters during their marine residency. So that's an interesting thing, and it also informs us if we want to start getting information about shad, maybe we need to think about ways to put receivers out there if we're going to put tagged fish out. So hopefully I did a little bit to convince everybody that we should go ahead and change what we're doing a little bit. I think that that would be my overall message to alosine biologists and managers is like, we've been doing more or less the same thing for a long time. The results are not great. So maybe we should think about making some changes and doing some things that will work. And that's about what I have for everybody today. And I'm gonna acknowledge my funding sources, Charles River Watershed Association. This is my beautiful co-author, Michael Bailey, who could not be here today, but he's very dynamic. Charles River Watershed Association, Sport Fish Restoration Grant funded this work. A lot of great people worked on it, and I thank everybody. And I'm gonna put on this video of the surgery while I take any questions. I hopefully have a few minutes.